Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at something that I think a lot of people will find interesting and maybe even a little bit personal.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm Sarah, and with me as always is John. And today, John, we're talking about aging.
Aging. Yeah.
Specifically, some of the changes that happen as men get older that maybe aren't super obvious right away, but
Right.
but if you know what to look for, you start to see them everywhere.
Yeah.
And
Subtle but significant, I think is a good way to put it.
yeah, exactly. So I think, a lot of our listeners are probably going to be able to relate to this, whether they've noticed some of these changes in themselves or
Yeah.
maybe in their fathers or grandfathers or other men in their lives.
Right. Husbands, brothers.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe you've even wondered, like, what's going on here?
Right.
Like,
What's the cause?
why is this happening? So we're going to try to unpack that a little bit today.
We are?
So we're going to focus on 4 specific signs of aging in older men. And we've got one that has to do with change in scent.
Okay.
2 that have to do with changes in size.
Okay.
And here's a little teaser.
Right.
One of them you might be able to notice even before you can actually see it.
Oh, okay. I'm intrigued.
So stick with us until the end of the episode because I think that last point could explain something that you've maybe observed but never really understood before.
Right. Okay.
All right, so John, let's just jump right in. The first one we're going to talk about is kind of a sensitive topic, but it's something that I think a lot of people have noticed, and that's
All right.
the fact that older individuals sometimes have a very distinct scent.
That's right. And it can be, I think a lot of people are a little bit hesitant to talk about it because it feels a little awkward or uncomfortable.
Sure, yeah, it feels delicate.
Delicate, yeah. But it is something that is, pretty well documented, and it's something that you notice, especially if you're, visiting relatives in a nursing home or assisted living facility or something like that.
Right, and it's not about hygiene, right? It's
Yeah.
not like
Exactly.
these folks aren't showering or, wearing deodorant. It's
It's different.
something different. Yeah.
Yeah. It has a biological basis.
Okay, so if it's not about hygiene, then what is causing the smell?
So as men get older, their skin chemistry changes,
Mm-hmm.
and they start to produce more of a molecule called non-genol.
Non-linol. Okay.
And non-genol is formed when fatty acids on the skin break down. And this breakdown is due to something called oxidative stress.
Okay, so oxidative stress, is that kind of like the wear and tear?
Yeah, you can think of it that way.
That happens on the cellular level over time.
Yeah, it's basically like the damage that happens to our cells as a result of just living and breathing and, being exposed to the environment.
Sure. So how would you describe this non-mental smell? What does it actually smell like?
So it's often described as being kind of grassy or waxy or sometimes a little bit stale.
Okay.
And it's usually not super strong, but it can be noticeable.
Okay.
And, I think people sometimes describe it as like an old person smell. But I think that's a little bit unfair because it's really just
Sure.
a natural consequence of aging.
Right.
It's not like people are choosing to smell this way.
Right, of course.
And I think, if you've ever been in a room with an older person and you've noticed a kind of faint but distinct smell that you can't quite place, that might be what you're smelling.
I think I know exactly what you mean. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's definitely there.
Yeah.
And why is it that it seems to linger so much? Like you would think that washing regularly would take care of it, but
Right. So that's a good question.
it doesn't seem to.
It doesn't. And the reason for that is that non-phenol has a different chemical structure than the body odors that we usually associate with sweat.
Okay.
So, when we sweat, we produce bacteria, and that bacteria creates the odor that we think of as body odor. But non-phenol is different.
Okay.
It's a molecule that actually binds to the skin and to fabrics.
Okay.
So it's not as easily washed away.
So it gets trapped.
Gets trapped. Yeah.
Interesting. And I know there was a story we were looking at about a 74-year-old engineer named Richard, and his granddaughter said he smelled like books and wood. Yeah.
Which I thought was a really interesting description.
Yeah, I did.
Kind of a poetic way to put it.
Yeah, and I think it kind of highlights the fact that, the smell isn't necessarily unpleasant, it's just different.
Right.
And, Richard actually tried changing his soap and cologne and all these things before he realized that the smell was actually coming from his skin.
From him, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, like, at what age does this really start to kick in? Is it kind of a sudden thing, or is it more of a gradual?
So it's definitely more of a gradual thing. The research suggests that non-cannabis production starts around the age of 40, but it really becomes more noticeable after 70.
Okay, so it's slowly building up over time.
Exactly.
And then after 70, it's kind of like
It becomes more
More
pronounced.
pronounced, yeah.
Okay.
So if you are noticing this change in yourself or in someone close to you and it's something that's bothersome,
Mhm.
are there things that can be done to minimize this scent?
So there are a few things that you can try.
Um, One thing is to use a soap that's specifically designed to remove excess oil from the skin.
Okay, so like an oil-fighting soap.
Exactly. And there are a number of these on the market now.
Okay.
Um, Another thing that might help is to eat a diet that's rich in antioxidants.
Okay.
So things like green tea, citrus fruits, leafy green vegetables, those kinds of
So
things.
things that are good for you anyway.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And the reason that this might help is that antioxidants can help to reduce oxidative stress in the body,
Which is that?
which is what we were talking about earlier. That's the damage that happens to the cells.
Okay.
So if you can reduce that damage, you might be able to slow down the production of non-sodors.
So kind of get at it at the source.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's interesting. And what about the fact that it seems to cling to fabrics? Is there anything that can be done about that?
So, yeah, because non-subtle binds to fabrics, it can be helpful to wash your clothes with a little bit of baking soda.
Okay.
Baking soda is a natural deodorizer, so it can help to neutralize the odor. And there are also some odor-neutralizing sprays that are specifically designed for aging skin.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And these sprays can be helpful for both your skin and your clothes.
So it's not just about masking the smell, it's about
Yeah.
actually
It's about breaking down the molecule.
breaking it down. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you are noticing a change in your scent or in someone close to you, it's really important to remember that it's a natural part of aging.
It
It's
is.
not a reflection on anyone's hygiene. It's just a shift in body chemistry.
Exactly.
All right, so let's move on to our second subtle sign of aging. And this is one that I think a lot of men are probably familiar with.
Okay.
And that's that kind of stubborn increase in belly fat that seems to happen no matter what you do.
Yeah, the spare tire.
Yeah, the spare tire, exactly. It's like you can be eating the same way you always have, you can be exercising, and yet
Still there.
it's still
Yeah.
there. Yeah. So what's going on there?
So there are actually a few things that contribute to this.
Okay.
First of all, as men age, their metabolism naturally slows down.
Okay, so you're not burning calories as efficiently.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then they also start to lose muscle mass,
Okay.
which further slows down their metabolism because muscle burns more calories than fat.
Sure.
And then on top of that, there are hormonal changes that happen as men age. And one of the biggest changes is a decrease in testosterone.
Okay.
And testosterone actually helps to regulate fat storage.
Oh, interesting.
So when testosterone levels decline, men tend to store more fat, and they tend to store it in their abdominal area.
So even if you're eating the same amount of food,
Yeah.
your body is just processing it differently now.
Exactly. And so, you might see this in men who have relatively thin arms and legs, but then they have this big belly,
Right.
and it's because of those hormonal changes.
Yeah, and this isn't just a cosmetic issue, right? I mean, there are some pretty serious health implications
That's right.
associated with carrying extra weight, especially around your midsection.
Yeah, so the type of fat that accumulates around the belly is called visceral fat.
Visceral fat.
Yeah, and it's different from the fat that's just under your skin,
Okay.
subcutaneous fat.
Okay.
So visceral fat is actually more dangerous because it's located around your organs,
Okay.
and it releases inflammatory chemicals into the bloodstream.
So it's like actively
It's actively causing problems.
causing inflammation. Yeah.
Yeah, and that inflammation can contribute to all sorts of health problems like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, even cognitive decline.
So it's not just about fitting into your clothes, it's about
Right,
your overall health.
exactly.
Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of men experience they might feel more tired, they might have more joint pain, they might have trouble sleeping.
Right.
And these things could all be related to that.
Yeah, they could all be connected to that increase in belly fat.
So what can men do about it? Is this just an inevitable part of aging, or are there things that can be done to manage it?
So it's not inevitable.
Okay.
There are definitely things that you can do. One of the most important things is to exercise regularly and specifically to do resistance training.
So lifting weights.
Lifting weights, yeah, or using resistance bands or doing body weight exercises, anything that challenges your muscles.
Okay.
And the reason that this is so important is that it helps to build and maintain muscle mass.
Okay.
And as we were talking about earlier, muscle burns more calories than fat. So if you have more muscle, you'll have a higher metabolism and you'll be less likely to store fat.
Makes sense. Okay. And what about diet? What kind of dietary changes can be helpful?
So in terms of diet, one of the most important things is to make sure you're getting enough protein.
Okay.
because protein helps to build and repair muscle tissue.
Okay.
And you also want to limit your intake of processed carbohydrates and added sugars,
Yeah.
because those types of foods can contribute to insulin resistance, which can make it harder to lose weight.
So focusing on whole foods,
Exactly.
getting enough protein,
Yep.
and trying to cut back on the processed stuff.
Yeah,
Okay, so it's a combination of lifestyle factors.
it is.
That can really make a difference.
Yep.
And it's important to remember that this is largely driven by those hormonal shifts that are happening.
Right.
So it's not a matter of willpower.
Yeah.
It's a matter of understanding what's going on in your body
Exactly.
and making adjustments accordingly.
Yep.
All right. So let's move on to our third subtle sign of aging. And this one is a little bit less well known.
Okay.
Have you ever heard that your ears continue to grow throughout your life?
I have heard that, actually, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds kind of strange, right?
It does, yes.
But it's actually true.
It is.
So the cartilage that makes up the structure of our ears continues to grow even after we stop growing in height.
Wow, so it's not like bones where they kind of stop.
It's different, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and on top of that, gravity is also playing a role.
Okay.
So over time, gravity pulls the ears downward, and that can cause them to stretch out and look even bigger.
So it's a double whammy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So if you look at pictures of yourself from when you were younger, you might actually see a difference in your ear size.
Oh, wow. I'm going to have to go dig out some old photos now.
Yeah, you should.
I'm curious.
Yeah, and studies have shown that ears can grow by an average of about 0.8 inches over a 30-year period.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's more than you might think.
Yeah.
And I remember we were reading about a 78-year-old retired teacher named George.
Yeah.
And he was looking at his wedding photos, and he was really struck by how much his ears had changed.
Really?
Yeah, he said they looked bigger and droopier, and his earlobes were thinner and more stretched out.
Wow, so it's not just the ears themselves.
It's the lobes, too.
Yeah, the lobes, too. Interesting.
Yeah, and this is something that happens to pretty much all men as they age.
Huh. I guess I've never really paid that much attention.
Yeah, it's not something we talk about a lot, but it's definitely there.
Right.
So is there anything that can be done to minimize this ear growth?
So there's not really anything you could do to stop the cartilage from growing. But there are things you can do to take care of the skin around your ears,
Okay.
which can help to keep them looking their best.
Okay.
So things like staying hydrated, using a good moisturizer, protecting your skin from the sun, those are all helpful.
So just general good skincare.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And, for the earlobes specifically, there are some products that are designed to help plump them up and reduce the appearance of wrinkles.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so if you're concerned about that, that's something you can look into.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like how we focus on wrinkles on our faces, but we don't always think about the fact that our ears are aging too.
Right.
Yeah, it's all part of the process.
It is.
All right, so for our final subtle sign of aging, and this is the one that I think might be the most surprising.
Okay.
Have you ever noticed that older men's calves seem to kind of disappear?
Yeah. I think I have, actually, now that you mention it. Yeah, they kind of lose that definition.
They do, yeah. It's like their legs just kind of become these sticks.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, so what's happening there?
So what's happening is muscle atrophy, which is basically a fancy way of saying muscle loss.
Okay.
And this is a common occurrence as people age, but it's especially noticeable in the calves.
And why is that? Why the calves?
So there are a few reasons for that.
Okay.
First of all, as we talked about earlier with belly fat men, experience a decline in testosterone and growth hormone as they age.
Right.
And those hormones are important for building and maintaining muscle mass.
Okay.
So when those levels decline, it becomes harder to hold on to muscle and easier to lose it.
Okay.
Another factor is that many older men become less active.
Sure.
And even if they're still walking regularly, they may not be doing the kinds of activities that really engage their calf muscles.
So like running or jumping.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then finally, changes in the circulatory system can also contribute to muscle loss in the legs.
Okay.
Because if you're not getting enough blood flow to your muscles,
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to be able to stay healthy and strong.
Interesting. And I remember we were looking at a story about a 75-year-old man named Robert who had worked on his feet for most of his life.
Yeah.
And he started to notice that his calves were getting really thin and weak.
Right.
And it was making it harder for him to do everyday things like climb stairs or even just stand for long periods of time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's easy to dismiss that as just a normal part of aging, but it's actually something that we can do something about.
Yeah, and it's important to do something about it because those calf muscles are really important for balance and stability.
So it affects your mobility.
Yeah, exactly. And if you have weak calves, you're more likely to fall.
And that can be a really big problem.
It can, yeah, especially as people get older.
Right.
So it's really important to try to maintain that calf strength.
So what are some things that men can do to strengthen their calves?
So there are a lot of good exercises that you can do.
Okay.
One of the simplest and most effective is just calf raises.
Okay.
So you can do those anywhere. You don't need any special equipment.
Just standing up on your toes.
Exactly. You can do them on a flat surface, or you can do them on a slightly elevated surface to make it a little bit more challenging.
Okay.
Um, you can also use resistance bands to add some extra resistance to your calf exercises.
Okay.
And then just getting regular exercise in general is helpful because it helps to improve circulation.
So anything that gets you moving.
Yeah, exactly. And, if you can do activities that really work your calves, like running or hiking or even just walking uphill, that's even better.
Okay, great. And are there any dietary recommendations?
So just like with the belly fat, it's important to make sure you're getting enough protein
Okay.
because protein helps to build and repair muscle tissue.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We've talked about 4 subtle but significant signs of aging in older men: that change in body odor, the increase in belly fat,
The growing ears,
the growing ears,
the disappearing calves.
the disappearing calves.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about.
It is, yeah. But I think it's important to be aware of these changes because it can help us to take better care of ourselves as we age.
Absolutely.
And, it's not about trying to fight the aging process. It's about understanding it
Right.
and embracing it,
Yeah,
making choices that support our health and well-being.
exactly.
So I'm curious, John, what resonated with you the most out of everything we talked about today?
I think for me, the thing that really stuck out was the importance of staying active.
Okay.
As we were talking about, all these changes are related to muscle loss and hormonal decline and things like that.
Right.
And the best way to combat those things is to stay active.
Keep moving.
Keep moving.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important message.
Yeah. And, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. It doesn't have to be marathon running or weightlifting competitions or anything like that.
Right.
Just getting out for a walk every day, doing some simple exercises at home.
Yeah. Just staying active.
Just staying active. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's something that anyone can do,
Exactly.
regardless of their age or fitness level.
Yep.
Yeah. So what about you, listeners? What resonated with you the most from today's episode? Have you noticed any of these changes in yourself or in the men in your life? And if so, what are you doing to manage them? We'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave us a comment down below.
Yeah, we love hearing from you guys.
Yeah, we do.
So please share your stories and your insights.
All right, well, that's it for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
We'll catch you next time for another fascinating exploration of something
Something.
that I'm sure you'll find interesting.
Absolutely.
See ya.
Bye.